Today's podcast is brought to you by Ryan, a leading global tax service and software provider that helps companies manage and minimize property taxes from acquisition to disposition and all points in between. As the firm with the most local market property tax professionals across the country, Ryan has experience in nearly every jurisdiction, unmatched by any other national, regional, or local provider.
Welcome to WMRE's Common Area Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the award-winning editorial staff at WMRE. Let's jump right into this week's podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Common Area with your host, David Bodamer. David, how are you?
I'm doing well. We're being snowed on again here in New York right now. After I feel like, I don't know, not having any snow for a couple of winters, it seemed like now we've had all of the snow. So
yeah, what do you get? 17 feet now, something like that. It's just ridiculous amounts.
I don't know. Yeah, it's. I don't know how much we're supposed to get today, but I mean, at least it's just snow. Unlike, I mean, right now we're recording this on Thursday and still with this crazy situation in Texas, and then I know and it's pretty cold where you are too right now, right?
Yeah, the other day it was negative 22, and that was without wind chill. I'm just like, is this serious? Is something broken? So
yeah,
it is what it is. But I know today you've got a guest on the show. That's right. And I'd love for you to introduce her to the audience.
Great. Yes. This week we have with us Melinda McLaughlin, who is the Vice President of Research with Prologis. Welcome to the show, Melinda.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely.
So I think, even some of what we were talking about with the weather kind of like dovetails with logistics, since that's something that disrupts it. But, the main thing that I wanted to discuss is that you guys put out these really great research notes and different findings, just with your position in the industry and all the visibility you have around the global logistics chain. I'm always impressed with the way that you turn that into broader commentary and insights for the industry at large. And you put together this report about just automation and the way that that's being adopted and how that might affect the logistics chain. So I wanted to just get more of your insights on that. So if you could just I think just to start, if you want to give us some of the key headline takeaways from that report, and then we can kind of go from there.
Absolutely. Well, firstly, thank you. I'm glad people are reading the reports and enjoying them. Joining Prologis, I found I was very lucky to not only have today actually nearly 1 billion square feet that's generating data all the time to pull from, but a very diverse range of customers and naturally a local team on the ground who are experts at what they do. So when we try to delve into an area, we're really asking, what are the fundamental changes in the way customers are using their supply chain? And automation definitely cropped up, not just over time as labor has been the number 1, 2, and 3 pain point for our customers, but especially during COVID-19, where even though we saw this rise in unemployment, what we heard is that it actually became harder to find skilled labor during the pandemic due to, childcare, elder care duties, absenteeism, and all those different things. So we wanted to take a step back, use that very diverse range of information and data points to say, 1, what is the state of automation today? 2, where's the change and why? And then 3, what does that mean for the future of logistics real estate? So there's a lot in here. We had to release it in 2 parts because there was so much content. But I think on the first part, what is the state of automation today? I think it's less prevalent than most people would believe. Whenever there is a piece of media on logistics real estate or on the supply chains, I feel like the video, the photography tends to focus on these highly automated, beautiful facilities with a lot of mezzanine and a lot of conveyors and robots. And while those exist, absolutely, they actually represent a minority of the space. Again, over 5,000 customers. The vast majority of them are in businesses where, while there's certainly automation that's been part of the way they run their operations for a long time. I mean, forklifts are automation. That highly sophisticated system really only affects 20% or less of spaces in an area like the US and abroad. So it's probably less prevalent than most people would believe. And those very sophisticated, they're called ASRS, automated storage and retrieval systems, where you see a lot of density, a lot of robotics. It's a much smaller proportion than that, less than 5%, maybe less than 3%. So really, this is still a trend that's impacting a minority of spaces out there. And that was kind of the first finding, is just level setting on what is the state of automation in warehouses today.
Yeah, so that's interesting just in and of itself, because there is a lot of focus on it. I think obviously a lot of people hear about automation and they think about, job losses and what that might mean. So I think there is a real reason why people are concerned about it, but it does sound like we're still in adoption point where it's only certain properties and certain users who are using it.
Yeah, well, the benefits are highly concentrated for your most labor-intensive operations. And today, that's absolutely e-commerce. Mm-hmm. So what you see is not only is the labor intensity, which is about 3 times as much as a traditional logistics operation where you're moving more pallets than parcels. Not only do you get the benefits of using the labor, but because it is such a speed-oriented business, there is a tremendous need for velocity, maintaining momentum, obviously using your human talent to its maximum potential, and reducing the order inaccuracy, because there's a lot, think about how much it costs to send something back because it's the wrong order. I mean, right. These reverse logistics costs are significant. So when you stack all that up, e-commerce uses more space, it uses more labor, and it has a much more complex operation. You start to add up all these different benefits of automation. But one thing I kind of want to step back and correct is we actually don't see a lot of job loss. Even in the highly automated facilities that we see in our portfolio, they're also still some of the most labor intensive. The question is, how are you using your automated talent, I guess you could call it, versus your human talent? And what we found is that automation is really about taking out these highly repetitive steps from the process and refocusing your human talent on parts of the operation that require more flexibility, more problem solving, more creativity. So it really is it isn't about cutting out jobs. It's about making sure you're using people in the right way and ultimately realizing more productivity.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very important corrective. So I'm glad that you threw that in. I was partly just trying to speak to, I think when people hear that word, sure, there are warnings about, but I feel like that's always been a thing too, though. Through the years, there's always this fear of, it's not a new thing, but just new technology, fear of technology, because is it going to, how is it going to kill my job?
Exactly. So. Well, one of the most well-known examples of that was the ATM, right? Everybody's like, oh, we won't have tellers anymore. But today we have more tellers than prior to the invention and implementation of the ATM. They're just doing more relationship-oriented things. So they're either doing sales or customer service. And, I think that it ultimately ends up a win-win, because simply dispensing cash was obviously something a machine could do. So within these facilities, when you take a piece, let's say one example is that repetitive walking. So what some example cases found was there were workers traversing miles a day, just kind of walking back and forth. And if you can take that and shift it to a conveyor, shift it to an automated forklift, not only do you save person that travel time, where it's not really value add, it's just moving things from one place to another, but you also improve the safety of your facility as well. Mm-hmm. So what we found was an important auxiliary benefit here was actually improving the work environment inside these facilities by, again, refocusing human labor and taking out some of the repetitive tasks.
So one of the things another thing that the report talked about is, okay, so if we're bringing the, if we're introducing more automation to these facilities, what is the implication for the space? And because, like, again, there might be a thought of like, oh, well, if maybe not for a great reason, but like there could just be the automatic thought, like, if it's going to be more automated, then maybe we need less space. So,
well, that's why we looked into it in the first place, right? It could be a real threat to demand. So great question. And I think that of course is your initial implication. It was certainly ours. What we actually found though, again, is it kind of goes back to what are your KPIs here? Mm-hmm. What are these operations really solving for? And the types of automation that they were implementing, where we saw the change, where we saw the growth, was really more about order speed time. So reducing the order lead time, so increasing speed, or improving accuracy. So when you think about, actually, let me back up. Where did we see the change? Where we've seen the most acceleration in adoption of automation are your mobile and your modular technologies. And the reason is hopefully pretty obvious. A lot of customers had decades ago, automation isn't brand new. Decades ago, experimented with these highly customized, very, very efficient, but very inflexible, installed, what we called fixed automation in the paper. So that's your very complex ASRS system. But what you find is if your supply chain needs change, if your product changes, if the way you want to configure your operations changes, that machinery was not able to adjust, which means, obviously there's less kind of secondary value, worse return on investment. There were a lot of examples of bad experiences in the past.
Right.
What's new?
So it was just simpler to not have that because it was an inflexible kind of system.
Exactly. So what's changed today? Not only do we see the demand side, so all that e-fulfillment, it's labor intensive, it's complex. That's really changing the demand for these technologies. But on the supply side, the technologies themselves are changing to improve the return on investment. And they're changing in two key ways. They're becoming either, if it is more static, they're more modular. So they're more flexible, more able to be moved within the facility and reconfigured and have a higher secondary value, which again improves ROI. The costs are coming down kind of the whole time as technology improves, but that in particular can have a big impact. Or they're mobile. So cobots are obviously, it's been around for a while now. Amazon was a leader there with Kiva, many other innovators in this space, and they're the kind of technology where you can experiment with one or two. You can lease them. You don't even need to purchase them. So while costs have been coming down, demand has been coming up, the technologies themselves are actually just much more conducive to the way customers run their operation today. But those technologies aren't built for higher density. They're there to solve the productivity equation. Again, to amplify your human labor, get more out of all the resources you're channeling to perform this operation. So you can see some space efficiencies. So Kiva, which is taking the picking part of the operation and doing it fully, automated. Yeah, they can reduce the aisle size because it's all, communicated. But then there's a lot of other cobot systems which simply lead humans around. So you don't, it obviously improves the productivity of the human. They're not searching for the right good. It improves accuracy. The machine knows exactly where to lead them, but it doesn't yield a real decrease in the logistics footprint. And modular technologies in many cases are very similar. So you see maybe small efficiencies gained, but because what you're really solving for is lead time and accuracy, it's, that's not the primary objective. Now, and some companies still are doing ASRS, so the more dense fixed automation, and it makes sense for certain product types to do that. So if you have one product and it's always kind of the same size, same shape, it might be a good solution, and you can get real density out of that, mainly on the storage side. But again, that's not where we're seeing the most growth.
I think it's like really clarifying to hear you talk about that and hear that it really, and it goes hand in hand with, I think, some other trends that I think that were pointed out here around just this premium on, and stuff that you just talked about too, but this premium on accuracy and getting stuff out. And also that, I think one of the parts of the pandemic and the strain that it's put on the logistics chain is that, we're all like more homebound and we're all ordering more stuff, but we want it pretty fast, and we want it, and if you have a bad experience around something that you ordered and it didn't come fast enough, or they sent the wrong thing, I don't know, that's going to affect repeat business. So, and also this idea that maybe not if you get the wrong thing, but also if it's out of stock and it needs to be gotten from further in the supply chain, so it takes longer to get to you. So, just this pressures on providers to have everything, have more stuff in stock, be able to fulfill stuff fast, and make sure that people are, not unhappy with their experiences. So just then how this dovetails with that, so that it wouldn't affect the real estate needs. It's just about making sure that you have to have everything stocked, and you have to be able to get it to people and then correctly, and then you don't want to deal with the reverse logistics. So I don't know, it's a very fascinating evolution of this business, just sitting from my seat. So, and I'm sure from yours it's even more fascinating, since you get to live and breathe it.
It's, I never thought I would be so interested in this space, but all the change that we've seen in the logistics real estate business, in supply chains, even just over the past year, it's moving so quickly and really intensifying competition, and the tools, the technology, the data, all the different ways in which this business is changing makes it such a ripe subject for examination. So I think we'll continue to see, and I know my team is continuing to track, and hopefully we'll update this study as supply chains continue to change. But I think we'll continue to see a really just, rapid pace of improvement to rise to meet these demands. One thing that we also point out in the study is, e-fulfillment alone, as you point out, we've all gotten very used to it during the pandemic, not just having it there as an option, but also the convenience, the service level standards, which are so high today. It requires 3 times as much logistics real estate as a brick and mortar supply chain, so as restocking stores. And based on how much change we've seen in the adoption of online shopping, e-fulfillment footprints they need to essentially double in size over the next 5 years. So we'll be looking, tracking these customers. Certainly it's going to lead to a lot of need for logistics real estate, but also monitoring, how do the operations change inside the building to rise to meet these challenges will be a key part of that as well.
And another really, really interesting data point that you had in this was the fact that companies that are doing more automation are signing longer leases. And again, not a thing that I would have, I think the report explains why, because if you're making this kind of capital investment, then you're going to want to be in the space longer in order to get a return on that investment. Makes a lot of sense, but it's just not a thing that I naturally would have thought about. So it was really, really interesting to read that.
Yeah. Supply chains, as much as I just said, they're changing quickly. They're also quite sticky. When you think about really designing your network to accommodate the flow of goods, you have a labor base, the talent that's there. They're used to their commute. When you install all of this advanced equipment, even if it's modular and mobile, you still face higher moving costs. And so what we see with customers is, one, it's frankly a pretty tough environment out there to find logistics space right now. Vacancy rates are near historic lows. So they're incentivized, in a number of ways to commit to a longer time frame in these spaces. And it's sort of a win-win. As a owner operator of logistics real estate, we like the stability of those longer leases. But we know part of it's because, some customers want to grow and they go out in the market and they simply cannot find the space that suits their needs in the locations that they need it.
And then, I mean, you talk about the need to build so much more space to accommodate the, all this, what we're talking about. How much ability is there to do that in the current, hot markets in the logistics chain? Like, is there the ability to build the amount of inventory that we are going to need, or might it actually alter the logistics chain based on trying to put some of the stuff in places where it might not be now?
It's a good question. Now, I would say in aggregate, we cannot build enough logistics supply in the real places where it's needed, which is very close to end consumers. Those are the spaces that are already really built out, densely populated, and the regulatory barriers are extremely high and rising. So one, finding land for development in many of those places is near impossible. But even if you could find something, we're facing higher resistance, higher costs. And so I do think in the markets closest to end consumers where we see that e-fulfillment need concentrated, we'll face a continued undersupply. Now, that's not to say that there won't be more building of modern stock in markets with lower barriers to new supply, places where you can find more ample land. It just isn't, in many cases, it's not ideal for the customer. You do want to be close to not only where there's key transportation junctures, where there are proximity to end consumers, but also proximity to labor. Like we said, this helps make your labor more productive, but it does not replace it. So all of those things are really pushing customers to get closer in to urban centers, but where you can build is further and further out. So we do see some development happening in new locations, new submarkets, and some customers go there because frankly, they need to make it work. They need the space to grow, and that's what's available. But I think overall, one thing that the report found is we kind of digested all of these impacts that are set to transform the demand side of the logistics real estate equation is, we're likely to have a shortfall, over kind of the near to medium term horizon, at least, because simply incorporating automation is not enough to outweigh the needs that are generated from cyclical growth, from e-commerce, and from retooling supply chains for resilience. I think one learning from the pandemic was we had spent decades, sprinting toward the most efficient supply chain that we could, the just-in-time inventory model. And when you start to hit some speed bumps, which frankly, were happening before the pandemic with some of the global trade tensions, US, China, Brexit, we had started to see some customers already begin to build inventories to help enhance resilience during some of these disruptions. And I think the pandemic was just the ultimate disruption. So going forward, when we talk to customers about what are some of their plans for the future, we do hear talk about 5 to 10 to 15% more inventory held within a country's borders, because so many of them lost revenue opportunities by simply being out of stock.
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting to see people grapple with that, and then what that's meant for our supply chain. And is there any opportunity for adaptive reuse of other property types to? I mean, I know like there's been some talk of, or some examples of, at malls doing, turning department stores into small distribution hubs locally. I don't know if that's really on par with some of, the kind of massive facilities that we might need, or the kind of things that you guys specialize in. But could there be some potential for total redevelopment of a mall into this kind of a use? Since seems like we're probably going to have fewer malls at some point.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a question we get a lot. And in fact, we did write a paper on this topic as well, just sizing the opportunity. So, a typical year of new logistics supply is 250 million square feet, give or take. The amount of mall space out there, or total retail space really, that is likely to be well positioned for redevelopment is a drop in the bucket. It's probably, we estimate 5 to 10 million square feet per year relative to that much larger total that we're normally used to. And for a few key reasons. One, when we talk especially about last touch fulfillment, a retail location that's in distress is not going to be well suited to get to end consumers in a quick time frame. A lot of times they're in distress simply because they're not close enough to end consumers or these really healthy, thriving consumption bases. So on one hand, there's just this tension of the retail that's likely to be in distress is not really the best positioned for e-fulfillment. As you get closer into urban cores, the retail also tends to be doing better, notwithstanding, of course, the current situation we're in where options are limited. But yeah, downtown core real estate, grocery anchored centers, all of them are doing quite fine. So it's really the lower quality malls that a lot of this press has focused on.
Right.
And the challenges there are pretty substantial. Now, again, there will be examples of this being done well, of really finding a diamond in the rough and redeveloping it. But in a lot of cases, the design of the site, even if you have a great location, the design of the site can be a challenge. The difference in values, there's still a pretty big gap, even though we've seen a lot of positive momentum in the logistics sector. There's usually still a pretty big gap between what a retail center will sell for and what a logistics center will get. So it requires a lot of compromise on both sides. So we just generally, as we took a step back and sized the market, it could, like I said, there will be examples of it being successful, but it's not enough to really change the demand and supply imbalance that we see in the space.
So there'll be like marginal examples, but it doesn't really get to the heart of the problem or the heart of the need that we have for this kind of space.
Precisely. I wish it were that easy. I wish we could just switch it all and our customers would be very happy and me as an end consumer, I'd get those goods within an hour or so. But again, where we see the need, it's still a very competitive environment for land use.
So yeah, the other question I was going to ask is, just given the success and the evolution and everything that we're talking about in the logistics sector, the kind of investors who are interested in this space, have you seen that evolve at all in the past year in terms of different kinds of investors maybe interested in getting into this business or at least investing with you or with other companies to capitalize on what's been happening?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's, again, logistics has not always been the exciting, sexy property type that it is today. It's something actually we had been seeing for a cycle or more institutions interested in increasing their allocation to logistics real estate. There's a lot of benefits, diversity, obviously the positive tailwinds from e-commerce and some of these other trends. COVID and the pandemic just accelerated that, both because I think the need for this type of space and the essential nature of these supply chains and the customer base that we have. Obviously, there was a spotlight shown on it during the pandemic. And then, of course, there was disruption in some other property types. Right. So we do see capital flowing to the sector, new players trying to get in here. And so it has had a positive effect on cap rates. For example, there was additional compression in 2020, and we expect to see more in 2021. Now, one of the key challenges that had maybe kept some investors on the sideline before persists, which is sometimes it can be really hard to deploy capital in this space. You need to buy a lot. You still need to buy a lot more warehouse to equal the same amount that you would do with just one skyscraper, for example. But given the positive value momentum in logistics real estate, again, the very real and demonstrable benefits of the sector, I think we will continue to see some pretty strong interest ahead.
So is there anything from the report or even or more broadly that I haven't touched on that you wanted to address?
Let me think. I think one key conclusion, if you look across our research over the past several years, is that location is becoming more important than ever. I think it was highlighted not only in automation, but we recently released a paper on e-commerce. Actually, we re-summarized a study that MIT had performed on the environmental benefits of e-commerce versus brick and mortar shopping. And one thing they found was if you put an urban fulfillment center at the end of your supply chain, so instead of, coming in from the outside and going on these routes, you got closer into end consumers. It improved the sustainability, measured in carbon emissions demonstrably, which really for our customers who are obviously very concerned about sustainability, but also about cost, means fewer vehicle miles traveled. It means more efficient labor time. And so what I think, when you tie all this together is happening is that supply chains are being viewed more holistically. The way that you design them has numerous benefits, both to your customers. So obviously those service levels that we talked about, but cost control as well. And I think one thing, as I take a big step back and look at it, is our customers, these retailers in particular, are looking to control more of their supply chain. We've had tremendous volatility last year at the beginning and middle of supply chains, with some very lumpy flow of goods. And then at the end, with the dramatic shift in the way consumers change their shopping behavior, so that, when you think about trying to control the entirety of this network, there was a lot in 2020 that was out of your control, that people were just responding to in the moment and doing the best they can. So as we take that and we go forward, I think there'll be more focus on how all of these pieces fit together and really deliver a superior customer experience, really amplify the way you can use a supply chain to your competitive advantage. So all of this, stitched together, I think means more focus on location, more focus on the right logistics real estate, and more focus on the way you design your operations to deliver, better customer service at the end of the day.
Well, I used up a good amount of your time, so I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. Oh, one quick question though, is if for folks who do want to see these reports, where can they find them?
Oh, so you can go to our website, prologis.com, and under the About Us menu, you can find Global Insights and Research, and that's where we publish everything. And definitely would encourage anybody who's interested in this space to visit that site.
Great. Well, thank you again so much for being so generous with your time and, walking me through some of these findings. That was very, very valuable for me.
Well, it was a pleasure for me as well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you both for being on the show. This is fantastic. I know our audience got a lot out of it. And of course, our last thank you goes to you, the audience. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Common Area Podcast with David Bodamer. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when David comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your colleagues. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at WMRE, this is Eric Johnson inviting you back in 2 weeks for all the stories that matter to you. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Common Area Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of WMRE or Informa. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only.
Today's podcast was brought to you by Ryan, liberating our clients from the burden of being overtaxed, freeing their capital to invest, grow, and thrive.